Welcome to this channel of intense life stories, where quiet betrayals, slow burn justice, and unexpected twists turn into confessions that could belong to anyone. If you enjoy realistic, emotional stories told by a robotic voice, get comfortable, turn up the volume, and stay with me until the end. Because what I'm about to tell you is how I canceled my own daughter's dream wedding and left her standing in front of an empty venue. My name is Rafael Mendez. I'm in my mid-50s. And a few hours ago, I legally shut down what was supposed to be the happiest day of my only child's life. While you listen to this, my daughter is probably crying in a designer wedding dress, outside a closed event hall, surrounded by waiters with nothing to serve and musicians with nowhere to play. The worst part for her is not the silence, but knowing that I was the one who pulled the legal trigger that stopped everything. Earlier today, she looked me straight in the eyes and told me that my presence would ruin the aesthetic of her perfect wedding. That my work-worn hands, my simple suits, and my background didn't match the refined image of the new family she wanted to join. She actually banned me from the reception I had paid for, down to the last cent. What she forgot is something very simple. In business, the person who signs the checks controls the show, and my patience ran out the moment she handed me an invitation that didn't even have my name printed on it. She wanted a fairy tale wedding, but ignored the fact that I owned the castle, the food, and the carriages. Betrayal has a cost that can't be covered with a few tears and a forced apology, and today I decided to collect that debt in the coldest way I know. I'm not a man of sweet speeches or constant hugs. I'm a man who understands the world through effort and results. For almost 3 decades, I got up before dawn to build a logistics company from nothing. My knuckles are scarred from lifting crates. My knees complain when I climb stairs. And there's a permanent tiredness in my eyes that belongs to someone who never allowed himself to fail. Every contract I negotiated, every sleepless night checking reports, had one goal: making sure my daughter, Amelia, never lacked anything. I wanted her to have the life I never had, with good schools, clean clothes, and opportunities that didn't depend on luck. Amelia grew up watching my success, but I don't think she ever understood the price behind it. For her, money was something that appeared on a card whenever she needed it. When she turned 21, I gave her a luxury car, and instead of being shocked, she accepted it like it was the most normal thing in the world, as if the universe owed her that gift. Our relationship seemed stable, or at least that's what I wanted to believe. I was the provider, the pillar, the man who fixed every problem with a phone call or a bank transfer. She called me Dad, with a bright smile, every time she needed me to cover her overdraft, and I, out of stupidity or love, always said yes. 2 years ago, Amelia met a man named Lorenzo. He comes from a family obsessed with appearances, people who live for private clubs, curated social media photos, and last names that sound important in the right circles. Lorenzo doesn't really work. He manages investments that are nothing more than his parents' fortune. From the first dinner, I noticed how they looked at me from above. Lorenzo talked about rare wines and trips abroad while I kept quiet, watching how my daughter began to imitate that same arrogance. She changed her clothes, her vocabulary, even the way she introduced me. I stopped being my dad, the businessman who built everything, and became just Rafa. He does something with trucks. When Lorenzo proposed to her, Amelia came to see me with a folder that looked like the budget of a small country. Imported flowers, a hall that only opens for high-end clients, a banquet designed by an award-winning chef, live music, decorative lights, custom invitations, and a dress that cost more than the yearly salary of some of my best employees. She hugged me, called me the best father in the world, and promised that this wedding would make the whole family proud. I was moved by what I thought was her happiness and agreed to pay for everything. I signed contract after contract, put my personal card down as guarantee for the venue, the catering, the drinks, the decoration, and all the little extras that kept appearing. The total amount would scare most people, but for me it felt like my final gift, the closing act of my role as protector. For months I focused on paying invoices. Amelia sent me photos of food tastings and floral arrangements, but never invited me to a single meeting. She said she was busy and that Lorenzo and his mother, a woman who always looked at me like I was dirt on her shoe, were handling the aesthetic details. I didn't complain. I thought my daughter just wanted everything to be perfect. In my mind, I saw myself walking her down the aisle, handing her over at the altar, and feeling I had completed my mission in life. I could not have been more wrong. A few weeks before the wedding, the atmosphere changed. Amelia stopped answering my calls as often. When she did pick up, she sounded nervous and distant. One day, I heard Lorenzo's mother in the background saying something like, "I hope your father understands that we need to maintain a certain level at the reception." I stayed calm on the outside. I'm a businessman. I know how to read between the lines. But I refused to believe that my own daughter was ashamed of me. I convinced myself I was imagining it. Then Amelia asked to meet me, not at my office or my home, but in a quiet cafe across town, a place where nobody knew us. She arrived carrying a folder and wearing a frozen expression I had never seen on her face. There was no "Hi, Dad," just a long sigh. She sat in front of me, didn't touch her coffee, and dropped the bomb. She said Lorenzo's family was very strict about protocol, that the guest list was limited, and that to avoid awkward moments, because of my lack of social refinement, they had decided it would be better if I did not attend the ceremony or the reception. She suggested I tell people I was away on a business trip, so nobody would ask questions. She said it with a calm, practical tone, like she was discussing a seating chart, not banning her own father from her wedding. For a few seconds, I felt like the floor vanished beneath my feet. I didn't explode in anger. What I felt was an absolute emptiness. I looked into her eyes, searching for the little girl whose scraped knees I used to bandage, the child who once told me I was her hero, and instead I saw a cold, ambitious woman who saw me as a problem to be removed. She wanted my money, but not my presence. She wanted the shine of the gold I produced, but despised the rough hands that forged it. I stayed silent while she kept talking, telling me how understanding I had always been. That was her biggest mistake, confusing my generosity with weakness. She thought I would accept this humiliation like I had accepted every other demand. But that afternoon, as I paid the bill for that coffee and watched her walk away without a hug, just a patronizing squeeze of my hand, something broke inside me. What stayed in its place was not rage, but a cold, sharp clarity. That night, I sat in my study in the dark with a glass of whiskey I never drank. Memories came in waves. Amelia at 8 years old, promising I would always be her favorite person. Amelia today, saying my face would ruin her pictures. The betrayal wasn't just the fact that I was not allowed to attend. The betrayal was that she had let me finance every flower, every piece of seafood, every bottle of expensive champagne, knowing all along that I would be standing outside, like an outsider. She used me to buy herself a new identity, one where I did not exist. The next morning, I received an email from the wedding planning company with the final schedule. In the seating chart for the main table, my name was absent. In its place, the groom's father, a man who has never done a real day of work, would be honored during the toast. There was also a note Amelia had sent to the decorator. Please make sure the style is classic, high status, nothing rustic, nothing that looks out of place. The message was clear. I was the rustic excess, the man who didn't match the polished image she wanted. What hurt me most wasn't being excluded. It was the cold calculation. She waited until the last big payment for the hall was due to tell me not to come. If she had told me earlier, I could have reacted differently, maybe cut the budget, maybe walked away. Instead, she made sure the money was secured and then tried to throw away the man who provided it. Around mid-morning, she called me. For a second, I thought her conscience had woken up, but I was wrong. She wanted more money. She asked if I could transfer about $9,500 extra because they had forgotten to include some special lighting system for the dance floor. Her voice was soft, almost childish, the same voice she used when she was little and wanted a new toy. Dad, it's the last detail, I promise. Lorenzo says without those lights the entrance will look cheap. Can you send it today, please? She asked, as if she hadn't broken my heart the day before. I stayed silent for a moment. There was a tightness in my chest, but when I spoke, my voice came out steady and almost emotionless. All right, Amelia, I said. You will get exactly what you deserve. She squealed with joy on the other end, said love you in a mechanical way, and hung up. Those were her last words to me. A cheap love you, worth $9,500. In that instant, the sadness evaporated and turned into something else, a focused, silent fury. I went to my office, closed the door, and opened the safe. Inside were the original contracts I had signed with all the vendors. Amelia, in her arrogance, didn't think about something basic. Legally, I was the only client. Every agreement, every clause, every cancellation policy was in my name, not hers. The contracts did not bind the wedding of Amelia Mendez. They bound Rafael Mendez, client and payer. I spent the afternoon reading the fine print. The hall, the catering, the band, the photography, the floral service, all of them had last-minute cancellation terms. Yes, I would lose a portion of the money as a penalty, but there would still be enough left to deliver a lesson none of them would forget. My daughter wanted a perfect wedding without her father. She would get exactly what she asked for, a wedding where I did not appear. The problem for her was that without me, there would be no event at all. That same day, Amelia sent me a picture from the rehearsal dinner. She, Lorenzo, and his parents raising glasses in a private celebration. The caption said, "Finally, just us, the family we always dreamed of." I wasn't in the photo, I wasn't in their plans, and clearly I wasn't in their hearts. They had erased me before the actual event even started. That night, while they laughed over expensive appetizers, I made phone calls. Short, professional, emotionless. I spoke with managers, business owners, and security coordinators. I explained that due to a drastic personal change, I was canceling all services immediately. I told them I accepted all penalties and wanted written confirmation. I didn't shout, I didn't beg, I didn't argue. When I hung up the last call, I felt a strange peace. The trap was set. They were going to arrive at a dark, empty hall, and for the first time in her life, Amelia would face the consequences of her choices without Dad stepping in to fix the mess. Then I placed one more call to my lawyer, a man named Victor whom I've trusted for years. We met in my private office that same night. There was no drama, just documents on the desk. I told him what had happened in the same tone I would use to discuss a quarterly report. He adjusted his glasses and said, "Rafael, if you cancel now, you will forfeit roughly a third of the deposits." I looked out at the city lights and replied, "It's not a loss, Victor. It's an investment in my self-respect. I want every contract revoked. I don't want a single chair moved in that hall. I don't want the kitchen to light a single stove. And I want the security team of the venue to have clear instructions. The event is canceled by the account holder for non-compliance. No exceptions. No last-minute deals." Victor nodded and started drafting the legal notices. We left nothing to chance. Timing is everything in a good strategy. I would wait until the last possible moment, so they had no way to replace what I was taking away. If I canceled days earlier, they might scramble for a loan, or Lorenzo's father might try to cover the costs. But if I shut it all down on the very day of the wedding, they would be finished. The logistics of an event that size cannot be rebuilt in a few hours. The day before the wedding, I went to work as if nothing had changed. My assistant asked if she should reserve a driver for the ceremony, and I simply told her my plans had shifted. Meanwhile, my phone filled with messages from Amelia. Pictures of her hairstyle trial, complaints about the weather, reminders that I should not appear at the hotel where Lorenzo's family was getting ready. I read everything and answered nothing. I let her believe that her obedient, hard-working father was at home, quietly accepting his fate. That afternoon, I authorized the transfers to pay all cancellation fees. I personally called the owner of the event venue, a man who knows my record and owes me a few favors from the past. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "Your daughter is supposed to be here in less than 24 hours. I answered, "I am completely sure. The contract is in my name. I am canceling it. If they show up, inform them that the account holder terminated the agreement due to lack of respect. You don't need to explain more." To make the blow absolute, I also called the band and the floral company. I paid every penalty in full and asked them not to contact the bride. I said I would handle all communication. In the world of money, people don't ask many questions if the payment clears. Everyone agreed. The next morning, the day of the wedding, I woke up early. There were no nerves, just a cold determination. While Amelia was probably surrounded by makeup artists and photographers, convinced that her grand entrance into high society was guaranteed, I was dismantling her big show piece by piece. Around mid-afternoon, a few hours before the ceremony, Victor sent me a message confirming that all vendors had received the notarized cancellations and that the penalties had been processed correctly. Legally, the wedding no longer existed as an event. There was no catering, no music, no decorations, and most importantly, no venue. I put on my best suit, not to attend a church, but because a man should look composed when he makes the hardest decisions of his life. Then I sat in my library, placed my phone face up on the desk, and turned off the sound. I knew what was coming. First confusion, then desperation, and finally rage. Right on cue, the storm began. My phone started vibrating nonstop. Amelia's name flashed again and again. I didn't answer. I let the silence of that room be the only response. I could picture it clearly. The decorating crew arriving to find the doors chained, security handing them a termination document, trucks full of flowers and equipment being turned away. After a while, the messages came. Dad, there's some kind of mistake at the hall. They say we can't get in. 10 minutes later, they're telling us the contract was canceled by you. Lorenzo and his parents are freaking out. Guests are on their way. Answer me, please. Fix this. I calmly poured myself a glass of water. In my mind, I saw Amelia in her expensive dress, standing on the sidewalk with photographers, relatives, and friends staring in disbelief as the trucks turned around. Eventually, the groom's father called. That one I decided to take. I wanted to hear his voice without the fake politeness. He shouted my name and demanded to know what was happening. We're at the club, and the staff is telling us you canceled the whole event. There are more than 250 people coming. This is a public humiliation. I replied with a calm that only made him angrier. Good afternoon. I'm simply respecting the aesthetic vision your family had. My daughter informed me that I did not fit into the image of the celebration. Since all the agreements are in my name, and I am the sole payer, I concluded that if my presence would ruin the party, the best option was not to have a party at all. You're a man of status, aren't you? I'm sure you can write a check and fix this immediately. There was a long silence. We both knew he didn't have that kind of money accessible, and even if he did, it was too late to rebuild everything. He muttered that I was bitter, that I was a small man, and hung up. I smiled to myself. I'm not small. I'm the man whose work built every single thing they were trying to enjoy while pushing me aside. Moments later, Amelia called again from the phone of one of her bridesmaids. This time I answered. Her voice was broken, a mix of sobbing and anger. You ruined my life, she screamed. Everyone is staring at me. Lorenzo's parents are calling me trash because my father can't honor his commitments. How could you do this on my wedding day? I answered with an icy tone. I didn't do anything to you, Amelia. You made a business decision. You decided my presence had no value. I simply followed your logic and withdrew my investment. You wanted a high society wedding without your embarrassing father. Now you have the freedom to pay for whatever celebration you and Lorenzo can afford with your own effort. Enjoy your evening. Then I hung up. Standing there, I felt something close to poetic justice coursing through me. I walked to the window and imagined the feast that never happened, the seafood that stayed in the supplier's kitchen, the champagne that remained in storage, the orchestra musicians heading off to other jobs. But the image I savored the most was Lorenzo's mother, the queen of protocol, trying to explain to their elegant guests why they were all standing in an empty parking lot with nothing to drink and nowhere to sit. Amelia tried to use me as a stepping stone to climb into a world that was never really hers, and I simply kicked the ladder away when she was at the top. The humiliation she wanted to spare me by hiding me or keeping me outside fell back on her, multiplied tenfold. In their little social circle, people will talk about this disaster for years. No one forgets a wedding canceled at the door for non-payment by the bride's family, especially when everyone thought they were rich. There were no scenes from me, no yelling, no dramatic confrontation. It was an administrative execution. The betrayer was punished in the currency she understands best, status and loss. While they answered uncomfortable questions and dealt with the anger of those precious in-laws, I sat down and enjoyed the quiet that I had bought at such a high price. About half a year has passed since that Saturday, and the silence in my house no longer feels like loneliness. It feels like a victory. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Amelia and Lorenzo didn't even make it to any kind of honeymoon. I had also canceled the flights and hotel reservations, of course. Their love and his parents' acceptance evaporated as soon as they realized Amelia was not the key to an open wallet, but the daughter of a man who refuses to be treated like dirt. Without my money, she stopped being charming in their eyes and became a burden. Amelia has tried to reach me several times. She sent emails full of self-pity, talking about forgiveness and blood ties. I didn't answer a single one. Blood alone gives you relatives. Loyalty gives you family. She renounced our bond the day she decided I was an aesthetic problem. Now she works in a clothing store owned by a friend of hers, earning just enough to finally understand the value of every bill she used to spend without thinking. I don't feel joy at her struggles, but I do feel a deep satisfaction knowing she is learning what the real world is like. Life is a cruel teacher, but it's the only one whose lessons you never forget. I have rewritten my will and reorganized my companies. A large part of what was going to be her inheritance is now destined for foundations that support young entrepreneurs who come from nothing and know what effort means. My employees receive better bonuses, and my business is stronger than ever because it is now run by a man who no longer has emotional weak spots outsiders can exploit. I've learned that being a good father does not mean sacrificing yourself until you disappear. It means teaching respect, even if the lesson requires burning down the entire stage. Sometimes people ask me if I regret being so harsh, if it doesn't hurt to have lost my only daughter. My answer is always the same. I didn't lose anyone. The daughter I thought I had was just a fantasy built out of my generosity. The real woman was the one who pushed me out of her own wedding and treated me like a stain on her new life. I don't want that person near me. My conscience is calm because I acted with the same coldness I received. Justice is not always a courtroom. Sometimes justice is simply letting people taste the poison they prepared for others. She wanted a wedding without her father, and I gave her exactly that. Now she has a life without her father, and I hope she enjoys it as much as she enjoyed planning my humiliation. Sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all. It's sitting back and watching life collect the debt. If this story hit you as hard as it did when I lived it, leave a like, tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. And don't forget to subscribe and activate the notifications so you don't miss the next stories on this channel.